Content warning, this video has depiction of cartoon violence. To that one person who always shows up to my streams, you're going to bloody love this because I need to talk about
Limbus Company.
For the past few months, I've been going out of my way to talk to online randos about media literacy in preparation for this very video on the subject. A little disclaimer, I do not want anyone thinking that I am the good guy in this video. I was very much provocative. I instigated a lot of these conversations. My hands are not clean here, alright? But I just want to talk about the subject and what these conversations entailed. Let's get started. One of these places where I had the conversation was the subreddit for the game
Limbus Company.
While I have been shouting at online brick walls everywhere all throughout my life, a single experience on this specific subreddit stood out because it perfectly encapsulated this topic I wanted to talk about. For that, I need to do a quick literary analysis of
Limbus Company.
For my viewers who aren't as messed up in the head as I am to play such a game, a quick summary. The sequel to Lobotomy Corporation and Library of Ruina by the game devs at Project Moon
Limbus Company
is a turn-based RPG gacha game with a coin and initiative mechanics. I will be calling the collective of games the Project Moonverse. Putting the complicated ethics of gachas aside, the Project Moonverse is filled with gore and violence and depressions and chickens. It is also one of the greatest collective pieces of literature of the 21st century. It is a beautifully woven tapestry of mythology and politics, of legends and modernization, of ideologies, of culture, of fairy tales, of history. It incorporates multiple aspects of all these topics along with adaptations of great historical literature into a single cohesive world. It is an incredibly impressive feat of high literature on par with classics like Lord of the Rings. There are many genres commonly associated to it: grim dark fantasy, cyberpunk dystopia, steampunk science fiction, but those are all surface genres. Speaking for myself as a fiction writer, I kind of hate putting genres on our stories because the public understanding of genre is kind of meh. I put fantasy as the genres of my novels, not because it's actually fantasy, but that's just what people understand. Things like fantasy and sci-fi aren't really genres, at least not by how a lot of modern writers use them. They are settings. For example, Lord of the Rings isn't a fantasy story, it is an adventure story set in a fantasy world. Likewise, Limbus Company isn't a sci-fi whatever, it is an epic adaptation set in a mixed dystopia. An epic is a story that is large in scope, so epic adaptations are adaptations that crosses multiple stories that inspired it or are modified from. Think of Avengers Endgame or Warehouse 13. I miss you guys so much. The genre of adaptation is fascinating and unique because it requires an intimate knowledge of the topic you are adapting, or a mindful awareness of your own lack of understanding in the subject, such as an Arthurian fiction that has nothing to do with Arthur and Camelot but rather is a political mystery with Sherlock Holmes and Little Red Riding Hood, may or may not be on my Patreon page. Basically, when you're doing an adaptation, you need to know. Your writing has to be purposeful. Story elements are callbacks or references to something else. You do not bring up characters who are living in exile outside of a capitalist dystopia, name them Domino and Crayon from Cloud Town for fun. They are there to show that problem-solving skills and creativity are not welcome in that capitalist dystopia. Dreams are not needed. It is purposeful. A more obvious example of this would be in the main character.
Limbus Company.
These main characters are all based on famous works of literature. Hong Lu is from Hong Lou Meng, one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. Ishmael is from Moby Dick, Dante is from Dante's Inferno, and so on and so forth. Each of them is correspondent to a specific culture, and each of them are given a synonym number, which is then correspondent to an association number, one of the many factions in the story that uses the number from the language of that specific culture. You don't have to understand what all those jumble of words mean, just that these are all very specific and purposeful choices. Even the way the story beats are written is purposeful. One of my favorite examples, super spoilers for Limbus Company, is the character of Don Quixote, based on the novel The Ingenious Gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha, which I'll just be calling the novel. Otherwise, 80% of the script will just be me saying the name Don Quixote. I won't be doing an analysis of the novel itself, just watch one of the many other content that does so. Links below. Don Quixote in the novel is a man with delusion of grandeur that he is a chivalric knight, and Don Quixote in the game
Limbus Company!
who I will now just call by a nickname, Donkey, also shares the same delusion. The character of Sancho in the novel is the deuteragonist and is seen as the sane everyman. Towards the end of the novel, Don Quixote becomes Sanchoified. He loses his delusions and becomes a sane man. However, Sancho becomes Quixotified by the same time, gaining the delusion of chivalry. The history of Quixotification and Sanchoification as a theme is fascinating, because during the original time of the novel in the past, people were more interested in the Sanchoification. It contributed to the idea of the death of chivalry, that it was a funny, childish delusion. But nowadays, in modern retellings, we are more focused in the Quixotification of Sancho. Modern retellings of the novel focuses on the impossible dream of chivalry. This is a very specific history related to these terms. To know this, you need to understand the history. The story of Donkey in
Nimbus Company.
follows a very similar route to the novel. Her backstory was that 200 years ago, she was Sancho. She then becomes Quixotified and becomes a Don Quixote type. Her story then continues in the present, modern time, where she, as Donkey, gets re-Sanchoified, returning to Sancho. But by the end of the modern retelling, she is Quixotified again. This is a reflection of the very real history of the literary analysis of the novels. This was purposeful. Plot elements were made to incorporate this time shift. The story would have functioned just as well without that 200 years time skip, but it was there. The age of Romanticism, the starting point of the fascination with Sancho's Quixotification, started in about the 18th century. The modern retellings, the re-Sanchoification and the re-Quixotification, started in the 20th century, 200 years apart. Exactly the same amount of time as in the game's story. And at this point, you might now be wondering, what does all this have to do with a series titled Why Are People Evil? Well, I'm trying to build up the picture for you to understand that literary analysis is fucking complicated. People like me have spent over a decade of our lives studying the singular topic of literature just to get to the point where we can analyze shit like I just did, even as a hobby. I have a specialty in analyzing cultural context, and others will have spent an equally inordinate amount of time studying other subfields. I've just spent the better part of 10 minutes giving you the simple and basic prerequisite knowledge to understand that epic adaptations are purposeful. That was the whole point of this literary analysis, to teach you one sentence. Literary analysis is a university level subject for a reason, which means that media literacy, the foundation of literary analysis that everyone needs, is super crucial to the craft. And if someone's media literacy is lacking, they will lack the ability to do literary analysis. And because of that, they get to do stuff like deny the existence of fascism. Remember the subreddit? This is where that comes in. Before I start, I need to point out that this is all an opinion piece. I will have historical backings on this, but without the ability to talk to any of the team members who worked on the story, I am just very, very, very confident in my analysis instead of just being correct. It all started when I point out that the term arbiter, a class of military troops in the city, was a fascist allegory. The city is the setting for the Project Moonverse, and it is made up of districts run by wings, labeled A to Z, which are basically corporations that monopolize godlike technology. Capitalism. The A, B, and C wings, also known as the Head, Eye, and Claw, basically runs the place. They have their own military force, known as the Arbiters, Beholders, and Executioners respectively, that are overpowered forces to suppress all dissent. It's not difficult to do a quick thesaurus search to know that Arbiter, Beholder, and Executioner are literal synonyms for judge, jury, and executioner. This means that the governing body of this country sees itself as judge, jury, and executioner of all its laws. That is the literary implication. The average citizens do not have recourse. This is fascism. Plain and simple. The city is a fascist, authoritarian, capitalist state. We've already established that the writers not only know what they are doing, but are also very purposeful in their naming of things. And according to the people that commented on my analysis of the city being a fascist state, I was wrong. They just said no. I don't see how I was wrong, nor was I given a different analysis that wasn't just someone going, but apparently I was wrong. Maybe someone eventually had an actual reply, but I turned off notification by like day 5 because it was getting depressing. You might now be thinking, how can someone look at the arm of the law being called judge, jury, and executioner, not think that that same system is fascistic? And I don't know. Which is kind of a problem because the whole point of this series of videos is to find out. But I can make a philosophical guess. Now I'm going to sound a little pissy here, because I am. I've spent too much time of my life arguing the definition of fascism with people online who have not even spent a fraction of the time I have researching the topic. I don't care what your personal definition of fascism is. I've already made a video on it. Go watch that instead. Hell, go watch 4 videos on it. What I want to talk about is media literacy. One of the reasons people can deny the existence of fascism in media is because they lack media literacy. If you don't understand what you're reading, you're not reading what it says. You're reading what you feel. You get people who can confidently say that arbiters are not fascist allegories but are some sort of power scaling, a ridiculous take, which, you know what, let me just dissect this stupid anime obsession with having titles for power scaling. For example, in Bleach, I argued that in the prequel game Library of Ruina that there are evidence for the city being an allegory of Nazi Germany. One of the most obvious literary allusions is the Kabbalah, a school of thought in Jewish mysticism. The main characters and the protagonist factions are all built on it. They are named things like Chokmah and Melkuth, and they are Jewish in mythology. Their headquarters is a library, the library, based on the book that's based off the Tower of Babel. The entire point of the library was to find the one true book that had the answer to humanity. The city assigned designations to the people they deem dangerous to the purity of their society. We follow the library's journey as they are assigned increasingly dangerous designation until they are eventually exiled from the city. The first designation is Kanad. That word plays a double meaning. It can mean a small wing, and that fits because the library is the remnant of a missing wing of the city. However, Kanads can also mean rumors, and given that in the story Kanads are literally compared to rumors, that seems likely too. Anti-Semitic tropes are also known as anti-Semitic canards. They started in the 2nd century, around 100 AD. It will eventually lead to the foundation of a book called Mein Kampf. The next designations are urban myths and urban legends. The spreading of the lie. Pope Urban II would call for the First Crusade in 1096. It will eventually lead to the Rhineland massacres, killing thousands of Jews. Historians see this as the first in a long chain of dominoes that will end in the Holocaust. The third designation is Urban Plague, where Jews were killed en masse during the Black Death of 1348. This will lead to the mass migration of Jews to a certain country called Poland, and lead to the inevitable urban nightmare designation of World War II. 3 million Polish Jews will be killed. By this time in the story, the entire city knows of the library. The library fights openly against its oppressor. The goal of the library was for its head librarian, Angela, to become human because she, as an AI, is considered an impure creature. She wants to become human, to remove the memories of all the horrible things she had to endure for thousands of years, due to the prejudice of someone else, unable to see her as a human. Remind you of anything? None of their enemies are just stumbling in anymore. They are prepared. The library is given the designation Star of the City. The Star of David was worn by Jews that dissent against the Nazi, and they were used by the Nazis to mark who to kill. By the time the library gains the status of Impuritas Civitatis, they were marked for exile. They were to be banished to the outskirts, an inhospitable place filled with horrors beyond imagination, to join Crayon and Domino to die. The arbiter sent to carry out the exile alongside a beholden executioner, judge, jury, and executioner, said, "The library has already become an impurity of the city. We couldn't stand by any longer." Impuritas civitatis means impurity of the state. The Nazis sent their vision of racial impurity to camps, an inhospitable place filled with horrors beyond imagination, to join people like Crayons and Dominoes to die. After the war, over 10 million are dead. My Reddit comment, the one dissecting the allegories against fascism of Limbus Company, and by extension Library of Ruina, was downvoted to hell, and every reply was people saying that was either wrong or overreaching. To these people, Limbus Company was just some game they enjoyed. Why do I care? People like me make them laugh. My analysis was a funny joke. It's just a game, it's not that deep. Franz Kafka, whose family was killed in the Holocaust, the author of The Metamorphosis, which was the adaptation of the character Gregor, one of the main characters of the game, who was genetically modified to become an Ubermensch and is fighting against the gene-splicing eugenicist neo-Nazi antagonist who is now part of the official Nazi faction committing ethnic cleansing after the antagonist's original faction lost in the First War and is now trying to incite a second war to destroy every multiverse, every impurity. Wasn't Hitler enough to convince them? I call this Kafkaesque if it wasn't so on the nose, because I was still considered wrong. And at this point, my confidence was shot. Maybe I really am wrong. Maybe I wasted my life studying this topic. Maybe I'm just not as good as I think I am. All of those are very real possibilities that I have to live with every single day because my anxiety-ridden brain wouldn't let me forget it. I muted that Reddit thread and never wanted to hear about it again. After all, it's just a game. Maybe I'm wrong. Why should I care? And then something interesting happened. A fascinating experience about making my more complicated videos is that I almost always give up halfway, but for some reason the so-called antagonist always comes in when I have given up and give me just enough spite to want to try again. That's right, this channel is fueled by spite. This should have been where the video ended, with me giving up. But when I went to another Reddit thread to talk about something completely different, to forget about my analysis, one of the users followed me there to continue the argument. Like a weirdo. So I got curious and I checked out their profile. And that's when I understood why this person was denying the obvious fascist allegories. This person was a racist, anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant, salute-defending, dog-whistling fascist. I went back to check the profiles of the people replying to me, and after I scrubbed through the edgy teenagers and hobbyists, there they were. Fascists. And I am reminded that there are people out there whose sole purpose is to make us think that their hatred don't exist, that we are overreacting. And suddenly, I didn't care that I was downvoted to hell. I don't care everyone thought my analysis was wrong. Because if I had not spoken up, I would be no different from the people who didn't think about these things. And I didn't want to stop thinking. Because now, at least, that idea is out there. And when people see it, remember it, they can draw a line. But let's not pretend this is something uniquely right-wing. I can make a pro-independence video comparing democratic backsliding cities to dystopias, and someone can say I'm being pro-colonialism and calling that city a Disneyland. How? Hi, Future Aiden here. I was doing the first pass of editing this video. I usually do about 3 passes to do facts and quality checks, and I was about to delete the Hong Kong rant because it wasn't complete. See, up until now, I had a theory about why these people are so bad at media analysis in this specific way, but I could never get them to say it because 1, it would be a leading question if I asked it, and B, it would immediately be an admission of error, and nobody likes to be wrong. I don't like to be wrong, which is why I work so hard to make sure I'm as correct as I can be in these videos. Bright side of being wrong though is that you immediately become correct since you can correct your error and become more right. I recently got my misconceptions corrected by a Tomska video of all things. Anyway, I shared my Hong Kong video on Reddit and this commenter was basically doing the thing I was complaining about earlier, and I admittedly very rudely and snarkily asked something along the line of, how do you think? What's the thought process for you to reach this conclusion that can twist my words and meanings so terribly? And they replied, as we know, it's best to only ask for the explicit intentions of the author when assessing an artifact's meaning and message. Lemao. This reply is fascinating. Like I said, I was about to delete my segment on Hong Kong, but I couldn't put this speculation of mine into words. But this basically did it for me. There are two levels to media literacy. There is your surface understanding, which is what you are directly being told, and the immediate impact that the creator wants you to feel. These are your elements within the immediate story. It's Captain America going, "I can do this all day," or dun 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 dun. It's to elicit something immediate. And then you have your deeper levels of understandings. These requires you, the audience, to have an understanding of certain behind-the-scene knowledge. Like how dissecting the poverty theme of Harry Potter requires you to have knowledge of Rowling's background, or how knowing the history of the Kira slide makes you appreciate it more. The first are basically things that are provided for you in the media itself. The second are things that you have to bring along yourself for further understanding. My theory is that these people with bad media literacy lacks the second part, and usually that's fine. You don't need to have deep knowledge to enjoy most media works. My Hong Kong video, for example, wasn't made just for people who gets the background. Even if you don't know anything about the history of Hong Kong, you can still get something out of it. But you need to know that you don't know in order to not do deeper media analysis on a subject you're not knowledgeable about. Most people will just admit that they don't know the deeper knowledge and just learn. But if you pretend to know, if you pretend to be knowledgeable, you can just ignore that. This Redditor, throughout my entire interaction with them, clearly lacked deeper understanding. There was another Redditor in the same thread who said my video sucked and I was okay with it. That was fine because they were not analyzing the deeper level, because they did not purport to be an expert on the deeper level. But this guy didn't. This guy was analyzing me, the writer. My theory is that these people, in the face of a deeper analysis of something they don't know, creates a strawman version of the author based on their own beliefs to fill in the gaps, which is why this reply was so amazing. This person admitted that they don't care about the history of the author of a work. This is a very good way to get lied to. If my message had not been in good faith and this person wasn't distrusting but looking for something they want to believe in, this person will fall for liars. Understanding the history of the authors of a work is important in understanding if you can trust them. One of these methods is actual skepticism, and the other one is what this guy did, the pretense of skepticism. This guy is a lefty, but they disagreed with my video, so they created a version of a guy they dislike in their mind. In their mind, I am a pro-colonialist, pro-capitalist outsider fetishizing the city in question. Doesn't matter that the video doesn't mention those things, doesn't matter that the history of me, of this entire channel, isn't those things. Doesn't matter that I have family and friends in Hong Kong who I asked about the city, or that I have close emotional history with Hong Kong, or that I have been there multiple times, or that the theme of the video wasn't actually about Kowloon. They are arguing with the guy they dislike, so the things I made must be the antithesis of their beliefs. This explains a lot, like how these people famously don't understand the point of stories, like how Elon Musk thinks the cool thing about Blade Runner is the dystopian aesthetic, or how these people like AI art even though the art themselves are meaningless because it allows them to create their own strawman author. Or to bring it back to the topic of this video, how people think the term arbiter is just power scaling instead of an allegory because they have put their own strawman ideologies into it. There was another person in the Hong Kong comment thread that really showed how this worked in a different kind of way. This person understood the exact meaning of the video. Their analysis of what I tried to portray was 100% correct, and judging by their profile of Minecraft and 3D printing, they're no literary expert. Maybe they are, I don't know, I really shouldn't presume. But the reason this person, who we'll call person B, was correct in their analysis this time was for the same reason the other guy, person A, was wrong. They also aren't regulars of my channel, so they likely also don't know anything about me, but their history with Hong Kong is closer to mine than person A. Person B lives in Hong Kong. They are the exact type of person that I made the video for, so their strawman of me is just me. Because they have the right context to do deeper analysis, their analysis was successful. Having the correct background understanding of the author of any piece of media is crucial to accurately understanding it. And when you try to do deeper analysis without the right context of the author, you can end up doing things like believing in a story of liars. Imagine if my video about Hong Kong wasn't just a story about the life of a city's identity and culture, but something more concrete and impactful, like a racist comment about Haitians eating cats and dogs. If you didn't know the history of the person making that comment about how he lies constantly through his fucking teeth and choose to do deeper analysis then and there, choosing whether to believe them then and there, you might end up accidentally making a strawman of the prerequisite knowledge and believe them. Or worse, like the wrong Redditor, person A, you might want to believe them, so you create that strawman regardless. Because I'm an egotistical bastard, I think about my stories a lot. They are my message to the world. When I write a divergent character similarly to an abled character, do people get its meaning? When my main character dies and accepts that a woman he has never met, who with he shares no blood, is still his family, do people get its meaning? And when my fascist villain smiles, is a quiet supporting character, and has no traits of populism, do people get its meaning? I then think of the writers at Project Moon. When they write their stories, research these literature and histories, and craft a universe from their mind, do we get its meaning? Because that's their legacy. That's their message to the world. As of this year, I will have been writing for 20 years. I have dedicated the plurality of my life on this earth to this craft. And it breaks my heart to watch this art form that I love be butchered by the death of media literacy. I'm watching actual bad guys do the bad guy thing and have the public en masse wondering if they did the thing. This is the endpoint of the death of media literacy. One of my earliest lessons as a writer is that stories are just truth told with lies. Writers have to trust that their readers are smart enough to see the fiction, the lie, in order to understand the truth, the message of the author. That process is media literacy, the ability to read between the lie. If you can't do that, then all you're reading are lies. Media literacy isn't just about fiction, it affects non-fiction too. It branches out to scientific literacy and historical literacy. My video on Hong Kong was non-fiction, but it was also misrepresented. Your inability to read between the lines will affect your ability to paint full pictures. One of the goals of my previous video in this series was to create a simplified scale for a complicated subject. Never once did I say the subject was not complicated. I even pointed this out at the start of my video. And I even reiterate this in the middle. Now, imagine the frustration when one of the criticism of the video was that my scale was simplified. Like, my dude, that's the point. Jesus Christ, I'm about to have another stroke. This relationship only works if I can trust you, my handsome, beautiful, and most importantly, smart viewers, to read between the lines. I have to be able to trust that you understand that I cannot give you a detailed breakdown of every political ideology in a 20-minute video. I have to trust that you understand this video in particular is giving you just a bite-sized chunk into an accumulation of specialized knowledge of over a decade long. I need to trust that you know that series of videos are part of a bigger picture. Hence the word series.
What can I help you
Shut
with?
up, Siri. I don't even own an Apple, but I was getting too serious and angry, so I had to cut away the tension. Just one of the many skills you gain over a decade of writing. The famous Are We the Baddies skit by Mitchell and Webb wasn't making fun of Nazis. It was making fun of the people who didn't understand the symbols of Nazism and in turn ended up supporting Nazis unknowingly. It was making fun of media illiteracy. The Dunning-Kruger effect for media literacy has a stranger side effect. I'm not going to explain the Dunning-Kruger effect to you. I trust that my viewers are handsome, beautiful, and smart enough to know what it is. Big picture. But the effects peak for media literacy, where people have low skill levels but higher confidence level, the things that are said are conspiracy theories, because they have to make shit up to fit their presumed meaning. That's also how I did literature analysis when I first started 15 years ago. I didn't know what I was talking about. but I wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about. But once you reach the part of an expert where your confidence levels tapers off and you have all the skills and knowledge to back things up, your analysis sounds like conspiracy theories. Because art is complicated. Kim Ji-hoon, the director and writer of Project Moon, wrote the story of the city with inspiration from Evangelion. Evangelion was partially inspired by the novel Aito Genso no Fascism, which translates to Fascism of Love and Fantasy, a story about the realistic horrors and persuasiveness of fascism. To draw that line between Limbus Company and Aito Genso no Fascism requires knowledge and understanding of not just the works themselves, but the history of the people that goes behind it. Who inspired them? How do they live their lives? What did they read? And what did the authors that they've read? You may be able to argue that the city isn't about fascism, but you cannot argue that fascism isn't a main factor in the city. However, if you don't have enough media literacy or are willfully part of the problem, you can do that. And if you can do it in fiction, it's just a hop and a huts out to you from non-fiction. You can argue that fascism doesn't exist. You can argue away the science. You can argue away suffering and genocide. So if I have to answer the question, how does media illiteracy help evil? It makes it so that a person can't see past the fiction because they lack or don't care about media literacy. Or like some of these people, because the evil they are trying to deny is their truth. They are the baddies. And at some point, like the anti-Semitic canards, the difference between not understanding the truth and spreading the lie won't matter. It'll all be real. This is my third time filming this on my sixth version of the script. Thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my patrons, especially my VIP patron Aureole. Thank you for your continued support. I really appreciate it. This video was more stressful to make than the Cult of Singapore video where I nearly got sued. For those videos, it's easy to draw a line between reality and bullshit. I just have to present the information, but this one, it's all opinion. It's an entirely opinion piece. I did reach out to some of the people who work on the game, but of course they can't talk about it, totally understand, contracts, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the difficult part isn't that. The difficult part is when you are talking with these people who like deny the meaning underlying art, it's very gaslighty. Like in my Hong Kong video, I wrote a line when I was conversing with someone about the Hong Kong video. They told me I didn't mean that when I wrote the thing. I had to do a double take. I'm like, oh my god, did I forget to write the thing? Did I not write the thing? But no, it's there. And I chose every footage very carefully to make sure that it represented what I wanted to represent and what I wanted to portray of the country. And it's so jarring and off-putting. It shakes you up. Like, did I make a mistake? I have to pause and just go like, did I messed up, you know? This video is entirely focused on covering media literacy. I'm not going to go into why it's so difficult to have these kind of conversations with people. I think that's another entire video. I had an entire 10-minute segment in the script dedicated to just that subject, which I had to cut because I nearly broke my own rule and spiraled into it. I have a feeling this video is going to be one of the most hated video on my channel. Please go easy on me. My heart can't take it. I'm in this weird position right now in like doing this YouTube video where I keep feeling like it's not enough. Like I have to do more, I have to produce more, I have to research more, I need to put in more, and it's not really healthy because even though I have nothing else to add, and I'm pretty sure I've thought through all the possible scenarios that I can think of, but I just keep thinking, what if I'm missing something? And it's not a healthy way to make content. What does it say about the internet that I'd rather go up against a vindictive cult leader than have conversations with weirdos online? Thanks to my Patreon, especially my VIP Patreon Aureole. I'm so glad I didn't have a stroke because that means that I'm saving the stroke for the future. Thank you for watching. I love you. I love you. There's no one here. Bye.